All right. Welcome back, everyone. It is the afternoon session of the ninth day of the JavaScript stack. I got sidetracked over lunch break. I didn't post the videos. I apologize for that. I will get them up as soon as we're done with lecture. We're moving on to Mongo. Okay, so if you haven't yet, it's not a big deal if you haven't yet, but we need to go to the MongoDB Atlas and you just follow the instructions to set up MongoDB Atlas. Has everybody done this? Has anybody not done it yet? Actually, never mind. I don't want to call anybody out. So if you haven't done it yet, do it. I'm going to demo setting up the connection to Mongo. I'm going to do this a little differently than the platform does. I'm trying to simplify it a little bit. So I'm going to leave some of the stuff out that they do just so we can see the nuts and bolts of how it works. And then I'll reincorporate some of the things they throw at you initially. So what I'm talking about specifically is this connecting to Mongoose. They have you install a bunch of dependencies, which we don't really need, like the .env and the cores. We're not going to need that till later. So the only thing we need to install is Mongoose. Okay, so MongoDB, just to give some background, MongoDB is just a database, right? Just like you used MySQL in Python, MongoDB is the same thing. We did a local installation in Python, or you guys did a local installation in Python. You can do that with Mongo. It's a little bit of a pain to get set up because you might have to change some permissions on files, but for the course, just use MongoDB Atlas. Just for grading purposes, and the platform goes through it. So this is my individual version of, or my database that I'm going to be connecting to. And it's basically, Mongo is a NoSQL database. And that basically means that when we have data in our database, which I don't think I have any yet, I had to reset everything up. But as soon as I push to Mongo, you'll see it looks like a JSON object, right? It looks like JSON. By JSON, I mean JavaScript object notation, right? So what we're dealing with in the database is very similar to what we've been dealing with the Luke API Walker and the Pokemon. All the data that comes back from the database is going to look very similar to what we've been interacting with so far. Okay. Any questions about Mongo and anything so far? Okay. So what I've done, this is where we left off this morning with the same recipes assignment I'm doing. I added a little bit to the checklist. So if I open the checklist, I believe I pushed it. I'm not sure if I didn't, I'll push it after. So our server file structure is basically going to look something like this. So as of right now, we have routes and controllers. In order to connect to Mongo and via Mongoose, we're going to need a configuration folder with a configuration that entitled mongoose.config.js. Okay, so this, no, I don't want to do it that. I don't want to do it yet. Do I have to do it? I guess I do. Okay, so didn't mean to do that yet, but so in my checklist, I have this root here that if I don't have the folder, it'll create it for me. So I did that prematurely. I didn't want to do it yet. So this mongoose.config is what kind of like my connection. I forget the name of the file in Python. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. The one with all the crazy code that you pasted it, copied and pasted it, and it just worked, right? So similar thing, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the configuration file. It's much simpler. It's easier to understand. So we're going to make our configuration file, and we're also going to need a models. Okay, so might as well go ahead and make that one now too. So I'm going to create that file. So now our file structure for our server is going to look like this. Okay, so we're going to have the server as the parent directory. We're going to have a config, controllers, models, node modules is just our dependencies, and then routes. We're going to have a couple more files in here as we go forward, but for right now, just to get a basic connection to MongoDB, this is all we need. Okay. So next thing I need to do is I need Mongoose. Okay, so Mongoose is a library we're going to use to connect to, let me back up. I think I misspoke. Mongoose is the library we're going to use to connect to Mongo. So this, again, we could do this without Mongoose. We could write this just in Node.js, but trust me, you don't want to, right? It's going to be much easier to use the pre-written library that's going to handle a lot of this for us, okay? So you can take a look at the documentation if you want, but it's pretty straightforward. We just need to install it the same way we've been installing everything else. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm going to run ls. So if I want Mongoose to be a dependency of my server, am I in the right directory to install it? The quick answer to that question, if I type ls and I don't see package.json, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, because all of our dependencies are going to be in package.json. So if I'm going to run npm install, it's probably going to give me an error. I don't want to try it because I don't want to mess things up, but I need to be in the directory where package.json lives. Okay, so I'm going to cd into my server. And I might have already installed it. I hope I didn't. I didn't. Cool. So I'm going to npm I mongoose. Okay. So now Mongoose is installed. It's right here. So now we can use it. Okay. So I'm going to go to my config, mongoose.config. And again, we're going to add our configuration here. So I'm going to go to the platform to get it. It's here somewhere. Here we go. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it right here. Okay. We're not going to use the .env right now. So we'll come back to that. So I'm going to take this out and we need to, I'm going to change this to recipes DB. Okay. Now we need the MongoDB URI. Okay. So in order to get that, we're going to have to go back to our Mongo database, right? So once you get everything set up, it's going to look like this. Instructions on the platform are really good, really straightforward. So once you get to this point, you get your database set up, you're going to have this button connect. Okay. Click that. And it's basically going to walk you through what you need to do to connect. So I'm going to use the drivers. We're going to, because we're using Node.js to connect. So I'm going to click here. This should all be preset. We don't need to install anything. When I come down here to this code right here, this is going to be my MongoDB _ URI. So this is what I'm going to copy. This is how I'm going to connect to my database, right? So that's what we're going to paste in that place on our in our config file. Okay, does anybody need me to go through this again? I'll do it just in case. So once your database is set up, go to connect, drivers, scroll down, and there's even a little copy button. You can just copy this. Okay. Cool. Okay, so I've copied that. I'm going to go back to my file, my mongoose.config, and I'm going to paste that code right here. So I'm just going to put it in quotes and paste it. Okay. So I set up my username as root. Just like in Python, you don't want to use, your password you use for your bank. Right. So whatever your password is, you're just going to make up a simpler, but you have to make it a little bit complex because they won't let it be too simple. So I chose the Eversecure password 1234, and that worked. Okay, so just to reiterate, you're going to change your name should be here if you copy it from the MongoDB site that should already be pre-populated, and you're just going to change your password to whatever you select as a password. Okay. And that's it. That's configuration. I'm hard coding it right now. We'll use the .env folder or file as we go along, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. Okay. I apologize for the barking if you hear that. So last thing we're doing is we're exporting the DB Connect. So notice this is a function called DB Connect. It does a try catch. So we're trying to make our connection here. We're trying to connect to this location. The DB name is what I'm setting up here. If it works, we're going to see this in our terminal, right? So if you see this, you know that the connection worked. Otherwise, if it doesn't work, we're doing a catch. So we're catching the error and console logging the error. And throw is something we haven't seen yet. Throw just means we're creating an error. We're stopping the program. We're saying, hey, something broke. It didn't work. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need is our model, which is right here. And I'm going to copy and paste this so you guys don't have to watch me type it all out. Uh-oh. Control Z. Copy. Okay, so let me walk through this. So right here, I'm just importing the dependencies I need for Mongoose. Okay, so this is import dependencies. Dependencies. Okay, so I need to create a model. And a model is just like the model you dealt with last stack, right? It's a model. It's the represents the data we're going to be storing. Schema, again, we heard this term before. It's basically we're making a recipe schema. The schema just keeps track of all of the pieces we're going to have in our item, right? So for right now, we just have a recipe that has a title and description. Let me change this to title and description. So we'll say title is required and description is required. Okay. Timestamp will add the created at and updated at. And finally, I'm just making a recipe model. And then I'm calling the model function here that I imported up here. Okay, so the first argument is just the name I'm giving to my model. And then the recipe schema, this is the recipe schema I create right here. Okay. And then I export default my recipe. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. Okay, so back to my checklist. I've got my config, I've got my model. Last thing I need to do is I need to go into my server. Server.js, and I need to implement my database, right? So from the Mongoose config, we have this DB connect, which is a function, right? So we want to invoke that function inside of our server, and that will basically create the connection to Mongo, or the connection to Mongo via Mongoose. Okay, so I'm going to go into my server. I need to import my DB Connect. So I'm going to import DB Connect, and then I just invoke it here. Okay. Let me start this up. npm run dev. Okay. Nice. Already in use. Where? Ah, there it is. Sorry about that. Try it again. Control C. Cool. So now we're listening on port 8000. Connection to Mongo was successful. And that's it. We're ready to move on. Okay. Any questions about connection to the Mongo database? That felt really fast, so I want to make sure I didn't lose anybody. Let me do a poll. And if you are lost, please tell me. I personally feel like I failed if you are lost, but don't feel like, don't take my emotions into consideration. Please tell me if I've lost you. Okay. All right. All right, so share results. Okay. Okay. Stop sharing.